Welcome aboard VelociJet Flight 4047 with service to Los Angeles. Marcus Rivera nodded at the gate agent and walked down the jet bridge, his worn backpack slung over one shoulder, navy hoodie wrinkled from travel. At 26, he looked like any other young professional heading west, maybe a tech worker, maybe a grad student. Definitely not someone you'd expect in first-class seat 2A. Here we go again, he thought, remembering the hotel lobby in Chicago where security had questioned his presence, just like the restaurant in Manhattan where they assumed I was delivery staff. I am so tired of this shit. Roberto Rivera had built Rivera Aviation Group from nothing into a transportation empire that now owned 67% of VelociJet Airlines. 2 years after his father's heart attack, Marcus still heard his wisdom. Don't announce yourself. Just be a customer. See how they really treat people when nobody important is watching. Marcus settled into 2A, placed his backpack under the seat, and pulled out a paperback book. Around him, first class filled with the usual crowd, business suits, designer handbags, expensive watches. He didn't fit, and he knew it. This happens everywhere I go, he thought, watching the subtle glances from other passengers. Hotels, restaurants, even my own company buildings when security doesn't recognize me. But Dad was right, you learn the most when they show their true colors. Rebecca Collins, senior flight attendant with 18 years' experience, noticed immediately. Since the divorce, 3 months ago, she'd been questioned about everything. Her performance reviews, her scheduling requests, her ability to maintain cabin standards. Her ex-husband had made her feel incompetent for years, and she wasn't going to let some kid in a hoodie make her look weak in front of passengers. The bills were piling up. Her supervisor had been watching her closely since the complaint last month, and she couldn't afford to look like she wasn't in control of her section. The young man in casual clothes didn't belong in her first-class cabin, and she'd built a reputation for maintaining the sophisticated atmosphere that real first-class passengers expected. I know the type, she thought, studying Marcus from the galley. Probably got lucky with some computer glitch. I've seen it before, they never know how to act appropriately up here, and then I get blamed when other passengers complain about the atmosphere. She approached his seat, smile forced but professional. Excuse me, sir. First time flying? First class with us. Marcus looked up, recognizing the loaded question. His hand tightened around his book. Here we go. No, ma'am. I see. Well, if you need any help understanding our first-class amenities. Her tone suggested he would need considerable guidance. Elena Martinez, a 3-year flight attendant, watched from the galley. Something about Rebecca's approach felt wrong, but challenging a senior colleague meant career suicide. She'd watched Rebecca make similar comments about other passengers, the businessman with the slight accent, who she'd questioned about his upgrade, the black woman in jeans, who she'd asked for additional ID. I'm such a coward, Elena thought, her stomach nodding. I've watched her do this to 3 other passengers this month alone, and I never say anything. David Thompson, settling into 4A, observed the interaction with growing concern. As a hospitality consultant, he recognized problematic service dynamics immediately. His mixed-race daughter had told him about these looks the way some service workers made assumptions based on appearance rather than credentials. I have to admit, he thought uncomfortably, I was thinking the same thing about his clothes when he boarded. This makes me realize I have these biases, too. Sarah Williams in 5B pulled out her phone to check social media before takeoff. Her travel blog had built a decent following by documenting interesting flight experiences. She had a feeling today might offer something worth sharing. 20 minutes into the flight, Rebecca returned to Marcus's seat clipboard clutched like a weapon. Her supervisor's voice echoed in her memory. Collins, we need consistency in first class. Standards matter. One more complaint and you're out. Sir, I need to verify something with your ticket. Marcus felt his jaw clench involuntarily. Stay calm. Let her dig her own grave. Dad's voice. The rope they hang themselves with is usually the one they ask you to hold. He handed over his boarding pass. She studied it with theatrical concern, though the document clearly showed Marcus Rivera, seat 2A, first-class paid fare. There seems to be an error in our system. According to our records, this seat should be assigned to someone else. What records? Marcus kept his voice level, but his knuckles went white around his book. I'm afraid passenger manifest details are confidential, but there's definitely been a booking mistake. We'll need to relocate you to the main cabin where you'll be more comfortable. David Thompson's eyebrows shot up, his earlier self-awareness, making him more sensitive to what was happening. Comfortable. What the hell does that mean? Elena Martinez felt sick glancing at her tablet, showing the manifest that clearly listed Marcus Rivera in 2A with no red flags, no notes, no problems. I'd like to see those records. Marcus said, his father's voice warring with his own rising anger. That's confidential information, sir, but I can assure you, as someone with 18 years of experience, I know when passengers are in sections that don't match their profile. My profile. The words hit Marcus like ice water. Every goddamn time! Sarah Williams' finger moved to her phone's record button, instinct screaming that something newsworthy was unfolding. Sir, people in first class typically present themselves more appropriately. Your casual attire suggests you may have been incorrectly upgraded through some system error. Gasps rippled through the cabin. Several passengers pulled out phones immediately. Marcus set down his book steel, entering his voice for the first time. Are you saying my clothes determine whether I belong in a seat I paid for? I'm saying that in my experience, legitimate first-class passengers understand proper presentation standards. 18 years of keeping people like him in their place, Rebecca thought desperately. I can't let standards slip, not when my job is hanging by a thread. I won't be questioned about my competence by some kid who got lucky with an upgrade. David Thompson couldn't stay silent, his earlier moment of self-recognition driving him to speak up. Ma'am, are you seriously profiling this gentleman based on his appearance? Rebecca spun toward him, her professional mask cracking. Sir, please don't interfere with crew safety procedures. Safety procedures? David's voice rose. He's reading a book in his assigned seat. What's the safety threat here? He's being disruptive and challenging crew authority. I haven't raised my voice once, Marcus interrupted, his restraint finally showing cracks. I've been sitting here quietly for 30 minutes, bothering absolutely no one. Elena Martinez felt tears building behind her eyes, watching the confrontation escalate while knowing she had the truth right there on her tablet. But speaking up meant contradicting Rebecca in front of passengers, which meant the end of her own career. I'm watching someone get humiliated, and I'm doing nothing to stop it. Mr. Rebecca glanced at the boarding pass with visible disgust. Rivera, I'm asking you one final time to cooperate and move to your correct seat in economy. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Marcus looked around the cabin at the uncomfortable passengers, at Elena's guilty expression, at Rebecca's desperate attempt to maintain control through sheer authority. His father's voice echoed, Son, dignity isn't something you earn. It's something you're born with. Never let anyone convince you otherwise. She has no idea who she just picked a fight with. He reached into his backpack slowly, not for his phone, but for the black leather portfolio he'd never hoped to use on a simple flight. Inside, CEO identification, stock certificates, board, documentation. Everything that proved Rebecca Collins had just made the worst mistake of her professional life. Miss Collins, he said quietly, his voice carrying new authority. I think it's time we cleared up this misunderstanding. Sir, I don't care what fake documents you think you have. Marcus stood up, commanding the attention of the entire cabin. He opened the portfolio deliberately, the gold Rivera Aviation Group logo catching the overhead lights like a beacon. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, his voice projecting clearly through first class. I'd like you all to meet Rebecca Collins, the woman who just spent 30 minutes trying to discriminate against her own CEO. Marcus held the open portfolio high, ensuring every passenger could see the official documents inside. The cabin fell into complete silence as 30 witnesses processed what they were seeing: corporate seals, CEO identification, stock ownership certificates showing 67% control of Velocijet Airlines. Rebecca Collins staggered backward as if she'd been physically struck. Her clipboard clattered to the floor, the sound echoing like a gunshot through the stunned silence. Her legs gave out completely. She slumped against the galley wall, mascara streaming down her cheeks as 18 years of authority crumbled in 30 seconds. That's impossible," she whispered, her face draining of all color. Marcus turned the portfolio toward her, his CEO identification photo staring back accusingly. "Congratulations, Miss Collins. You just discriminated against the person who owns this plane." David Thompson was already furiously typing on his phone Google search results, confirming what the documents showed. His eyes widened as photos populated Marcus Rivera at business conferences, articles about Rivera Aviation Group's market dominance, recent coverage of the young CEO's leadership philosophy. "Holy hell," he muttered, showing his screen to the passenger beside him. "He's telling the truth. He actually owns Velocijet." The businesswoman in 1A stared at her phone screen, then at Marcus, shame creeping across her face. "I have to admit," she said quietly, "I was thinking the same thing about his clothes when he boarded. This makes me uncomfortable. I didn't realize I had these assumptions too." The information spread through first class like wildfire. Passengers pulled out phones, some to verify, others to record all of them, understanding they were witnessing something unprecedented. Sarah Williams started live streaming immediately, her voice hushed with shock. "Guys, you're not going to believe what's happening on this flight. A flight attendant just tried to remove a passenger from first class because of how he was dressed. Turns out he's the CEO who owns the airline." Comments began flooding her stream. "No way. This is insane. Please tell me you're recording everything." Marcus remained standing, the portfolio still open, his presence now commanding the entire cabin's attention. "Miss Collins, for the past 30 minutes, you've tried to humiliate me in front of these witnesses because you decided I didn't look like I belonged in a seat that I literally own." Rebecca's hands shook uncontrollably. Her 18-year career, her financial stability, her professional reputation, all of it crumbling in real time. "Mr. Rivera, I had no idea who you were. If you had just identified yourself. So, assumptions are fine, as long as you don't get caught." Marcus's voice cut like a blade, his polished corporate demeanor finally cracking to show raw frustration. The question hit Rebecca like a physical blow. Around them, passengers were capturing every word, every reaction, broadcasting the confrontation to thousands of viewers in real time. Elena Martinez finally found her voice, stepping forward with her tablet. "Rebecca, I tried to tell you. The manifest clearly shows he belongs in 2A. His name, his seat, his paid fare. It's all right here. I've been trying to get your attention." "Elena, shut your mouth," Rebecca snapped, her professional composure shattered. Marcus's eyes narrowed dangerously. "At least one person on this crew has a conscience." A businessman in 3C shook his head in disbelief. "Ma'am, I watched this entire thing unfold. That young man was sitting quietly reading a book. You're the one who created a disturbance." The woman in 1A added, "I travel first class every week. I've never seen anything like this. You owe him an apology." But the most damning voice came from an unexpected source. An elderly passenger in 4D who had been silent throughout the confrontation spoke up with quiet authority. "Young lady, I'm 73 years old, and I've seen this kind of behavior before. In my day, we had words for people who treated others differently based on how they looked. None of them were complimentary." Rebecca felt the weight of 30 sets of eyes boring into her. Every passenger had turned against her, and she could see her reflection in their phones, a woman having a public breakdown over her own prejudice. Marcus stepped closer, his voice dropping but somehow becoming more powerful. "Miss Collins, let me ask you something important. How many other passengers have you treated this way? People who looked like me, dressed like me, but couldn't fight back. The question hung in the air like an indictment. Rebecca's mind flashed with unwanted memories. The young Latino businessman she'd questioned last month. The black woman in casual clothes she'd demanded additional ID from the teenager she'd insisted was in the wrong section. Oh God, she thought, the full scope of her behavior finally hitting her. What have I been doing all these years? I was trying to maintain standards. You don't have standards, Marcus replied, his voice carrying the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to boardroom command. You have prejudices, 18 years of experience, and you still can't tell the difference between assumptions and reality. The intercom crackled to life. Captain Rodriguez's voice filled the cabin, confusion and concern evident. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. I've received some very urgent communications from our corporate headquarters. Mr. Rivera, if you're aboard, please know that the entire flight crew is at your complete disposal. A collective gasp rippled through first class as the captain himself confirmed Marcus's identity and authority. Rebecca felt what remained of her composure collapse entirely. She grabbed the nearest seat back to keep from falling, the full magnitude of her situation crushing her like a physical weight. Please, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. Mr. Rivera, I have a family, bills to pay. My divorce just went through and I can't afford to lose this job. Since the divorce, I've been questioned about everything. My performance, my decisions, my worth. I wasn't going to let some kid in a hoodie make me look incompetent too. Then you should have focused on doing your job instead of policing passengers, Marcus replied, his voice final as a judge's gavel. Elena Martinez stepped closer, her voice stronger now as she found her courage. Mr. Rivera, I need to tell you something important. Rebecca has done this before. I've watched her question passengers who don't look right for first class. Usually they just accept it and move seats. I should have spoken up every single time, but I was afraid for my job. How many times? Marcus asked quietly. Elena's voice dropped to a whisper. At least 6 passengers in the past 2 months alone. The admission crashed over Rebecca like a wave. She covered her face with her hands, finally understanding that her behavior hadn't been isolated incidents. It had been a pattern of unfair targeting that had hurt innocent people. Marcus pulled out his phone, accessing the VelociJet employee database with his CEO credentials. Rebecca Collins, employee ID 4472, hired March 12, 2005, 18 years and 6 months of service. He looked up at her. 23 passenger complaints in the past 2 years, all dismissed by supervisors, all involving passengers of color or those who dressed casually. How could you possibly know? Because I own the complaint database, Miss Collins. Every buried report, every dismissed concern, every passenger you made feel unwelcome. I have access to all of it. Did you really think discrimination would stay hidden forever? Sarah Williams's live stream had exploded to over 12,000 viewers, comments flying past faster than she could read. This is the best karma I've ever seen. She literally tried to remove her own boss. 23 complaints. This woman is a serial discriminator. Justice in real time David Thompson was documenting everything, understanding he was witnessing a landmark moment for corporate accountability. Mr. Rivera, what we're seeing here isn't just individual prejudice. It's organizational culture that enabled and protected biased conduct for years. Marcus nodded grimly. Exactly. Miss Collins isn't just a bad employee. She's evidence of a broken system. Rebecca made one final desperate attempt to salvage something from the wreckage. Mr. Rivera, I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry. I'll take any training you want, undergo any counseling. Surely we can handle this quietly, professionally. Quietly. Marcus's laugh was sharp and bitter. Like you handled this confrontation quietly? You made a public spectacle of your prejudice, Miss Collins. You embarrassed me in front of 30 strangers because you thought I couldn't fight back. He gestured to the passengers still filming around them. Congratulations. You're about to become the most famous flight attendant in America. For all the wrong reasons. The words hit Rebecca like physical blows. She slumped into the nearest seat. Her career, her reputation, her future, all of it destroyed by her own choices. Marcus's voice dropped to a deadly calm. Here's the thing about dignity. Miss Collins, it's not earned by wealth or status. It's a basic human right. You forgot that, and now you're going to pay the price. The passengers around them absorbed the weight of that statement. They hadn't just witnessed discrimination. They'd witnessed a CEO discovering that his company had been mistreating people for years. Elena Martinez stepped forward with renewed determination. Mr. Rivera, I want to formally document everything I've witnessed. Not just today, but over the past year. I've been a coward staying silent while Rebecca treated passengers unfairly. I'm ready to tell the truth now. Elena, what would have happened to your career if you'd spoken up earlier? I probably would have been written up, maybe suspended for not supporting crew unity. Exactly. That's the culture we're going to gut and rebuild. Marcus looked around the cabin one final time. Ladies and gentlemen, what you just saw happens every day. Today it got consequences. The passengers listened intently, understanding they were part of something historic. Marcus's voice carried absolute finality. Rebecca Collins, you are terminated effective immediately. You will be escorted off this aircraft upon landing, and you will never work for any Rivera Aviation Group subsidiary again. Please, Rebecca sobbed. I'll lose everything. You should have thought about that before you decided other people didn't deserve basic human decency. He turned to address the entire cabin. Everyone in first class will receive full refunds and future travel vouchers. More importantly, you've helped expose a problem we're going to fix throughout this entire industry. The applause was thunderous passengers understanding they'd witnessed something transformative, not just individual justice, but the catalyst for institutional change. Captain Rodriguez's voice returned over the intercom. Mr. Rivera, we're beginning our descent into Los Angeles. I want to personally apologize for this incident and assure you that the crew will provide whatever support you need. As the plane descended through the clouds, Rebecca Collins sat in devastated silence. Her 18-year career reduced to a viral, cautionary tale about prejudice and accountability. Around her, passengers were already sharing the story across social media, ensuring that her actions would have consequences far beyond her own termination. Marcus Rivera gathered his simple backpack, the same one that had triggered this entire confrontation, and prepared to implement changes that would protect every future passenger from experiencing what he'd endured. But first, 30 witnesses would carry this story into the world, proving that sometimes justice isn't just about punishment, it's about ensuring that courage in the face of discrimination creates lasting change for everyone. The wheels of Flight 447 touched down at LAX with a soft thud, but for Rebecca Collins it felt like her world crashing to pieces. She sat motionless in her crew seat, mascara streaking down her cheeks, watching passengers file past, many stealing glances at the woman who had just become internet famous for discrimination. Marcus Rivera remained in his seat as travelers gathered their belongings, several stopping to speak with him. Sir, thank you for standing up. I've experienced this kind of treatment before. My son is about your age and black. I pray if this ever happened to him, he'd handle it with your grace. I'm ashamed I didn't speak up sooner. I'll never stay silent again. Each comment hit Rebecca like a fresh wave of shame. These people were talking about her, about the pain she'd caused, the basic human decency she'd stolen from innocent travelers. David Thompson paused at Marcus's seat, business card in hand. Mr. Rivera, what you accomplished today transcends individual justice. You've created accountability that will ripple through entire industries. Sarah Williams was still updating her exploding social media following. Final viewer count: 18,000 people watched this unfold live. Justice in the skies is trending worldwide. This story is resonating globally because everyone has either experienced discrimination or witnessed it. Elena Martinez approached with visible determination, her service badge no longer trembling in her hand. Mr. Rivera, I want to document every incident I can remember. Rebecca questioned a Hispanic businessman about his upgrade last month. She demanded extra ID from a black woman in designer clothes. She made a teenage girl move seats because she looked too young for first class. Elena's voice grew stronger with each confession. I should have stopped her. I should have spoken up. I was protecting my job while she was destroying people's dignity. Marcus stood, his casual clothes now irrelevant given the authority he'd revealed. Finally, someone with a backbone. Rebecca was escorted off the aircraft by airport security, her termination already processed through corporate systems. As she walked through the terminal, travelers who had followed the story on social media pointed and whispered. Her 18-year career had become a global symbol of workplace discrimination and its consequences. Within 3 hours of landing, the story had exploded across every major platform. Twitter VelociJet discrimination trending with 3 million tweets. TikTok analysis videos gaining millions of views within hours. Instagram, screenshots of the live stream shared by celebrities and influencers. LinkedIn business leaders writing articles about corporate culture and accountability. YouTube news channels running segments with titles like "Discrimination Backfires Spectacularly." But the most powerful responses came from ordinary people sharing their own experiences. I was told I didn't look like I belonged in business class because of my hijab. They questioned my first-class ticket because I was wearing basketball shorts. A flight attendant asked if I was sure I was in the right seat 3 times. The hashtag became a digital monument to discrimination that had been endured in silence for too long. Marcus spent his first evening coordinating with his crisis management team as the true scope became clear. His communications director was fielding hundreds of interview requests. Sir, this has become the biggest airline story in years. Every major outlet wants exclusive access. The public response is overwhelmingly supportive, but we need to control the narrative. Marcus made a strategic decision. That evening, he released a video statement recorded in his Los Angeles hotel room that would be viewed over 5 million times. Today, I experienced something that happens to thousands of travelers every day: discrimination based on appearance rather than credentials. But I had an advantage. Most victims don't have the power to fight back and create consequences. The video continued. This isn't about me getting justice. It's about ensuring the next person who gets profiled won't have to endure what I did. Effective immediately, Rivera Aviation Group is implementing zero-tolerance policies for biased conduct. Any employee who makes seating decisions based on passenger appearance will be terminated. Period. The announcement sent seismic shocks through the aviation industry. Other airlines, recognizing their own vulnerability, began emergency policy reviews. United Airlines, immediate comprehensive bias audits across all customer-facing roles. Delta enhanced passenger advocacy training mandatory for all crew members within 30 days. Southwest new passenger rights positions at every major hub. American third-party discrimination monitoring beginning next week. Within 48 hours, Rebecca's termination had triggered industry-wide transformation. The most surprising response came from Rebecca herself. Against her attorney's advice, she released a public statement that stunned everyone with its raw honesty. Watching video of my behavior was like seeing a stranger. I didn't recognize the person I had become, someone who judged human worth by clothing brands and skin color. Mr. Rivera deserved respect. Every passenger I ever treated unfairly deserved better. I let my personal fears and financial stress turn me into someone who caused pain to innocent people. I hope my public humiliation prevents others from making the same cruel choices." The statement couldn't undo years of prejudicial actions, but it demonstrated the kind of accountability that Marcus hoped would become standard. Rivera Aviation Group's boardroom was in chaos as Marcus convened an emergency session that would reshape the company's approach to customer service. The conference room was packed beyond capacity, with executives, employee representatives, civil rights advocates, and media observers. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus began, his voice carrying the weight of transformation. "Flight 447 revealed that we have cultural rot extending far beyond one individual's prejudice. We have employees who felt empowered to discriminate because they believed the organization would protect them." He presented data that made board members visibly uncomfortable. Rebecca had generated 23 discrimination complaints over 2 years, but analysis revealed over 300 similar incidents company-wide. Passengers questioned about assigned seats, asked for additional documentation, or treated with suspicion based purely on appearance. "This discrimination stops today," Marcus declared. "We're launching the biggest cleanup this industry has ever seen." The board unanimously approved a $30 million transformation initiative, immediate retraining of all 15,000 customer-facing employees, passenger advocacy positions with real authority at every airport, anonymous reporting systems protecting employees who speak up, financial bonuses for crew members who prevent discriminatory situations, quarterly bias audits conducted by independent civil rights organizations. Elena Martinez was immediately promoted to Director of Passenger Advocacy. Her first assignment creating training materials using Flight 447 footage to show real consequences of prejudicial behavior. David Thompson was hired as Chief Culture Officer tasked with identifying and eliminating unfair practices throughout the Rivera Aviation Group network. Sarah Williams' documentation became mandatory viewing for all new hires, demonstrating how discrimination could destroy careers and damage companies within hours. The legal implications multiplied exponentially. The Department of Transportation launched industry-wide investigations. Class action attorneys contacted hundreds of travelers who had experienced similar treatment. Federal legislators introduced the Rivera Amendment to existing passenger rights legislation. More significantly, the cultural impact was immediate and measurable. Discrimination complaints dropped from 200 monthly to just 12 across the entire network within the first month, as employees understood that biased behavior meant swift termination rather than supervisor protection. The transformation rippled beyond aviation into every service industry. Hotels reviewed guest treatment policies after executives realized they could face similar viral exposure. Restaurants audited seating practices. Retail chains implemented respect training for customer-facing staff. Marcus Rivera's refusal to accept unfair treatment had inspired accountability measures across entire economic sectors. 3 months later, Marcus received the message that meant more than any corporate accolade or media praise. It was from a young woman who had flown VelociJet the week after the incident. "Mr. Rivera, I'm 19, and Black and I was nervous about flying first class alone because my parents warned me about potential problems. But the flight crew was so professional and welcoming that I felt genuinely valued as a customer. The flight attendant mentioned your experience and how it changed their entire approach to service. Thank you for making travel safer and more dignified for people who look like me." Marcus kept the message on his phone as a reminder that corporate power, when used properly, could protect people who couldn't protect themselves. 6 months after Flight 447, discrimination complaints across Rivera Aviation Group had dropped by 94%. Customer satisfaction scores reached record levels. Employee retention improved dramatically as workers felt proud of their company culture rather than ashamed of it. But the real victory remained personal. Every passenger who now traveled without fear, every employee who felt empowered to speak truth every moment when respect replaced prejudice. The revolution that began with Rebecca Collins's bigotry and Marcus Rivera's courage had transformed not just one airline, but an entire industry's understanding of basic human decency, accountability, and justice. Rebecca Collins, meanwhile, had found her own path to redemption. After extensive counseling and bias training, she began speaking at hospitality conferences about the real cost of discrimination, not just to victims, but to perpetrators whose prejudices eventually destroyed their own careers. I learned that discrimination isn't always hatred, she told audiences. Sometimes it's fear, sometimes it's ignorance, sometimes it's just following patterns you never questioned. But the impact on real people is the same, and the consequences will eventually find you. Her story became a cautionary tale that prevented others from making similar choices, proving that even from the ashes of destroyed careers, something positive could grow. 1 year after Flight 447, Marcus Rivera walked through the same Dallas-Fort Worth terminal, once again dressed in jeans and a simple sweater. But everything around him had fundamentally changed. VelociJet gates buzzed with an energy of genuine hospitality. Crew members greeted every passenger, regardless of age, race, or attire, with authentic warmth. The subtle tensions that once characterized airline interactions had been replaced by an atmosphere where basic human decency was the baseline, not a privilege to be earned. As Marcus approached his gate, he spotted Elena Martinez conducting a training session with new hires. Her confidence had transformed her from fearful witness to industry leader, and she'd become one of the most sought-after experts on passenger advocacy. Remember, she was telling the group, our job isn't to gatekeep, it's to welcome. When you see a passenger, your first thought should be, how can I help them have an excellent experience? Not, do they belong here? Marcus boarded his flight with no fanfare, no recognition, just the natural respect every customer deserved. The flight attendant working first class was someone he didn't recognize exactly what he'd hoped to see, as the company continued growing its culture of inclusion. Good morning, sir. Welcome aboard. Anything I can get you settled? The greeting was effortless, professional, free of the suspicious undertones that had once poisoned interactions with passengers who didn't fit narrow expectations. During the flight, Marcus observed the new normal. A teenage girl traveling alone was treated with patient kindness. An elderly man needing assistance received genuine care rather than irritated compliance. A family with active children found accommodation instead of judgment. The changes had spread far beyond VelociJet. Industry-wide discrimination complaints had dropped 89% as airlines implemented similar accountability measures. The Rivera Foundation for Transportation Equity had resolved over 2,000 cases of unfair treatment across multiple sectors. David Thompson's consulting practice had grown into a global firm helping companies identify and eliminate prejudicial practices. His Flight 447 protocol had become the gold standard for creating fair workplace cultures. Sarah Williams had leveraged her viral documentation into a successful advocacy career with over 800,000 followers who looked to her for honest assessments of industry progress. Even Rebecca Collins had found redemption through accountability. Her nonprofit organization helped service workers recognize and overcome unconscious bias. Her TEDx talk, "The Day I Discriminated Against My Own Boss," had been viewed 3.2 million times. I destroyed my own career with prejudice, she told audiences. But more importantly, I caused real pain to real people who deserved better. The hardest lesson was accepting that good intentions don't excuse harmful actions. Marcus had quietly supported her rehabilitation efforts, understanding that lasting change required redemption alongside consequences. As his flight descended into Los Angeles, Marcus reflected on the journey from discrimination to transformation. Rebecca Collins' prejudice had revealed institutional problems that demanded comprehensive solutions, but real change had come from people finding courage. Elena speaking truth, David documenting injustice, Sarah ensuring the world was watching. The revolution hadn't been built on revenge. It had been sustained by collective commitment to treating every human being with inherent worth. His phone buzzed with a text from Elena, new hire, class of 47, just graduated. Every single one said they chose VelociJet because of our reputation for treating people fairly. We're attracting employees who want to be part of something good. Marcus smiled, thinking of his father's vision aviation that connected people across every artificial barrier society tried to construct. As the aircraft touched down, he looked out at Los Angeles, sprawling under clear skies. Somewhere in that city, and in cities across the country, thousands of transportation workers were applying principles that grew from one confrontation on Flight 447. Millions of passengers traveled with confidence that they would be treated fairly regardless of appearance or background. Marcus settled back into seat 2A, the same seat where his father had taught him that dignity wasn't something you earned, but something you were born with. The same seat where he'd learned that sometimes the most important battles aren't fought in boardrooms, but in the moments when ordinary people decide to stand up for what's right. The phone call that had shut down one woman's prejudicial power had become the foundation for building something infinitely better. Justice wasn't about getting even with Rebecca Collins. Justice was ensuring that what happened to him would never happen to anyone else. The lesson was simple but revolutionary. When those with privilege use their power to protect those without it, entire cultures transform. Sometimes the most important changes begin with someone simply refusing to accept that unfair treatment is inevitable. One moment of courage had reshaped an entire industry. One phone call had changed everything. Not through punishment alone, but through the patient work of building systems that protected every person's right to be treated with respect. As Marcus prepared to deplane, he thought of his father's final words. "Son, you'll face moments when people try to make you feel small. In those moments, remember dignity isn't earned by wealth or status. It's a basic human right. Never let anyone convince you otherwise." Today, thanks to 30 witnesses and one viral video, millions of travelers would never have to be convinced of that again. Sometimes one phone call changes everything. If this story moved you, if it made you think about how we treat each other, I want you to do 3 things. First, hit that like button to let me know this content resonates with you. Second, subscribe to this channel because I share powerful stories like this every week. Stories that matter. Stories that inspire change. And third, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Share it with your family, your friends, your coworkers. Because change happens when we start conversations, when we refuse to stay silent about injustice, when we stand up for what's right. The comments section is open. Tell me about a time you witnessed discrimination or stood up for someone who couldn't defend themselves. Your story matters. Your voice matters. Together we can make sure that dignity and respect aren't privileges to be earned, but basic human rights that everyone deserves. Don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss a story that could change how you see the world. Until next time, remember, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to accept that unfair treatment is normal. One voice, one action, one moment of courage can change everything.